If you've seen my desktop in the past couple of videos, you might have noticed that something seemed a touch different. Mostly the same, but slightly off. If you put them side by side, it's going to be like one of those spot the difference puzzles, and there's a very good reason for that. This is not Awesome WM. This is not Xorg, and this is not an extension of that April Fool's Day video. This is completely serious. I am now daily driving Wayland using the Hyprland compositor, and I've been doing so for maybe a week or two at this point. I'm not exactly sure, but I've got enough time to at least give my initial impressions. I'm going to wait a bit longer to do a full overview on all of my thoughts on Hyprland. But for today's video, this is not the first time I've actually used Hyprland. You might remember a good couple of months ago, I actually made a video on it. I didn't really use it long term. It was sort of my initial impressions back then as well. And I want to say it was version 0.13. And it was okay back then. The main reason why I didn't go and daily drive it then is it wasn't exactly that stable. The reason I went with that version in particular is the prior version caused my screen to violently flash, so it wasn't exactly usable. I wanted to give the project a bit more time to mature, iron out a lot of those bugs, and try to become an actual project that is worth daily driving on a production system. Now I am running 0.23, and honestly, it doesn't even feel like I'm using the same Hyprland. It feels like a completely separate project, besides the still kinda wonky the way the configuration is done. Many of those old bugs, actually most of them, all of the ones that I could find anyway, seem to be completely gone. Yes, it's not perfect, and is still a little bit rough around the edges, but it's actually usable now. Now, considering the positive words I've had for Sway, many of you are probably thinking, why Hyprland instead of just using Sway? And for a very long time, I would have agreed with you. If I was going to daily drive Wayland, Sway just seemed like the most obvious option. I know River and DWL absolutely have their fans, and I'm sure they are great compositors as well, but Sway is basically the no compromises WL Roots compositor. Sway does basically everything you could really want it to do. It has all the power of WL Roots and also has the power of the i3 IPC. I can control every window on my desktop the exact same way I would have done on i3. It's really cool, and it is really powerful. So even though it is a manual tiler, because of this power, there are scripts to make it work like a dynamic tiler and make it just so much more comfortable and actually productive to use. But that's basically where it stopped. Sway is really rock solid and includes a lot of stuff that isn't included in many of the other WL Roots compositors, but it's still really missing a lot of the stuff that I and many other people want. Now, while there is this great work being done with XDG desktop portals to make global shortcuts on Wayland, actually a thing and fit into the Wayland security model, and in the long run, this is going to be the far better option to go with, right now, no applications you actually want global shortcuts in actually support the global shortcuts portal, so it doesn't really matter. Hyprland, on the other hand, has had a working global hotkey system, global shortcut, whatever you want to call it, working for quite a while now, and I was completely unaware of it the last time I used Hyprland. Right now, I am focused on a terminal window, and the hotkeys I have set up for OBS actually do the thing they are supposed to be doing. I can use all of them perfectly fine, no questions asked whatsoever, like I would be able to on Xorg, on macOS, on Windows. I don't care how anybody else uses OBS. For me, if I don't have access to my hotkeys, the application is basically unusable. And right now, the only place that I know of on WL Roots that has a working global hotkey system is Hyprland. So that by itself is already massive points to Hyprland. And the way it works actually is pretty straightforward. This right here is my Hyprland config. Ignore most of the comments, most of them are from the example config and don't really matter anymore. I probably should go and delete them. The important part is this section here though, these bind commands. Now bind is the same thing you use when setting up your general desktop hotkeys like say full screening a window, opening up D menu, things like that. But in this case, we're changing the dispatcher being used. In those ones, we're using the exec dispatcher for execing a command. In this case, we are using the pass dispatcher for sending that key into something that we specify. So the first section here on the left-hand side of the first comma, this is going to be your modifier key. I'm not using a modifier key here, but in some cases I'm using things like, shift, main mod, things like that. But for sending keys into OBS, none of my keys are using a modifier. So that section remains blank, but it still needs to be there. The second bit is the key we are using. So keypad 0, that's on my numpad, all the way up to 9. Also, I'm sending in the F keys. There's a good reason I'm doing both of those. Then we are using the pass dispatcher. All of the dispatchers are explained over on the Hyprland wiki. The Hyprland wiki is always going to be your friend. And then the third section is the thing that we are sending it into. We are using a regex here to match to the OBS window. Now, as for the F keys and the numpad, normally I would like to be using the numpad. It gives me a visual indication of where the camera is going to go. So if I press the number 7, for example, it would go into the top left corner. If I press the number 1, for example, that would go into the bottom left. And I normally would have my full screen on 5. The problem is, for some reason, it doesn't work in Hyprland. This problem has been reported, and I've been going back and forth with Vaxry trying to work out what the problem is, but the numpad is not working globally, but everything else is. I have no idea why. I'm sure there's some sort of problem. Maybe it's in Hyprland, maybe it's in OBS, but the both of us are kinda stumped. And on the topic of OBS, Hyprland actually has a fork of the WL Roots implementation of their XDG portal. This is aptly called XDG Desktop Portal Hyprland, or more succinctly, XDPH. If you ever see mention of that in the wiki and issues and things like that, this is what they're referring to. And the reason why they have a fork is there are actually functions available in this that aren't available in other WL Roots desktops. One of those being is window capture actually working. So in the regular version of WL Roots, if I wanted to go and capture, say this browser window, technically I could go and capture the entire screen and go and crop it. But if that window ever moved, I would then have to go and, move it around. In Hyprland, I can just capture this perfectly fine and it just works. This is also very important to me because this is how I have the browser displayed when I'm doing a podcast. Window capture not working is not a Wayland issue, it is not an issue on GNOME, it is not an issue on KDE, it is just an issue on WL Roots, and Hyprland actually fixes it. While it's unquestionably better than the way it works over on Sway, there are still some issues I have with the Hyprland portal. One of them being, every time I open up OBS, I have to go and, reselect the windows. This is fairly normal in a portal. But over, I believe, in, is it KDE or GNOME? It actually might be both of them now. It can actually save your last selection. So you can just automatically go through and everything just works the same way it did before. So if I have, multiple selections in OBS, I need to go and reset those up, not just every time I open up OBS, but every time I change, like, an entirely different scene collection. The other thing, which I don't know if it can be fixed, is the window it shows you doesn't tell you what you are selecting for. So if you do have multiple things, you might actually go, place a window where there should be a screen, place a screen where there should be a window, and you have to just go and rearrange them. It's not a major deal, and I don't know if there's any way to pass that data from OBS into the portal, so if there's not, that's fine, there's no way to fix it, but if there is some way to do it, that would be awesome. But that's not the only stuff that's a little bit rough. This right here is Kdenlive. I'll give you just a second to spot the problem. If you said, this right here, because that's my wallpaper, and Kdenlive is see-through for some reason, you would be correct. Now, this isn't an issue specifically on Hyprland. This seems to be generally an issue with certain themes on WL routes. I don't exactly know why. I haven't found a good solution for it yet, but it kind of is what it is. It doesn't really matter. None of the important elements are see-through. It's just this border around the edge. I can totally work with it. One that's a bit harder to work with is the problem with Wayland file managers. This is just a problem on Hyprland. Let's say I want to grab this picture of Sephiroth here, and I want to go and drop it into Discord. On anything else, I could just drop it over. I didn't let go of my cursor there. Yeah, I can't drag it out of the window. And this seems to be the case with every Wayland file manager. You can get a bit of a better experience using a native Wayland file manager, but I don't want to do that, and I shouldn't have to. They should work. They work on Sway, they work on everything else. I don't know why they don't work here. But even if I did use a native Wayland file manager, it would only let me drag files into other native Wayland windows like Kdenlive and things like that. Discord, Brave, and a bunch of other applications I use run through Wayland. So it's a bit of a problem. I was also seeing this really weird problem while playing FF14. Not moving my mouse whatsoever to control the camera, just pressing my mouse buttons, and seemingly out of nowhere, seemingly completely randomly, my camera snaps up looking at the ground. I'm not the only one who's seen this in FF14, and I'm not the only one who's seen this in gaming generally. I've seen similar reports in games like Guild Wars 2 and other things like that. I don't know why, no one knows why, and it's not a problem exclusive to Hyprland. It seems to happen generally on Wayland. It happens on Sway, it happens on KDE, and it's really annoying. And it's a problem. Luckily, running the game in GameScope completely eliminates the problem, so just do that. Now, before someone says, "Hey Brodie, why are you complaining about these in a video? Why don't you report these problems to the developer?" They have been. All of these problems have been reported to the developer, and I and many other people have been going back and forth with him, trying to work out what the problem is. He has been very active trying to work on these problems, but some of them aren't exactly clear what the issue is, and what is going wrong in Hyprland, what is going wrong in WL routes. Maybe it's the application that, you're trying to work with that's the problem, where the problem actually is. Some of these problems turn out to be a little bit more difficult than we expected. The Kdenlive problem, he just added a workaround where you can just force extra opacity, and it dealt with it. So that's not a problem anymore, at least on the Git version. I don't believe it's made its way into a stable release yet. So, as it currently stands, I am mostly happy with Hyprland. It isn't perfect. It seems to be a kind of reduced experience compared to Xorg, but it's not so reduced that I can't actually use it. It is so much better than using Sway, and I'm kind of at the point where if someone wants to use a tiling window manager on Wayland, Hyprland is probably one of the better options to go with, unless you want to use a tiling plugin with something like KDE, which is, totally an option, but that's up to you. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. What do you run? Do you run Exorg? Do you run Wayland? Have you tried out Hyprland? What do you think of it? Or have you never used it and have an opinion on it? I would love to know. So if you liked the video, go and like the video. And if you really like the video and want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, Scribe, Sally, Bearer Pay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and peace out.